that?" said Harry quickly. "That's just it. I can't remember," said Hermione, biting her lip, "and I can't find the story where anyone else—" "Hermione, let me read your composition," said Ron, desperately checking his watch. "No, I won't," said Hermione, suddenly severe. "You've had 10 days to finish it. I only need another 2 inches. Come on." The bell rang. Ron and Hermione led the way to History of Magic, bickering. History of Magic was the dullest subject on their schedule. Professor Binns, who taught it, was their only ghost teacher, and the most exciting thing that ever happened in his classes was his entertaining the room through the blackboard. Ancient and shriveled, many people said he hadn't noticed he was dead. He simply got up to teach one day and left his body behind him in an armchair in front of the staff room fire. His routine had not varied in the slightest since. Today was as boring as ever. Professor Binns opened his notes and began to read in a flat drone like an old vacuum cleaner, until nearly everyone in the class was in a deep stupor, occasionally coming to long enough to copy down a name or date, then falling asleep again. He had been speaking for half an hour when something happened that had never happened before. Hermione put up her hand. Professor Binns, glancing up in the middle of a deadly dull lecture on the International Warlock Convention of 1289, looked amazed. "Miss Granger, Professor, I was wondering if you could tell us anything about the Chamber of Secrets," said Hermione in a clear voice. Dean Thomas, who had been sitting with his mouth hanging open, gazing out the window, jerked out of his trance. Lavender Brown's head came up off her arms, and Neville Longbottom's elbow slipped off his desk. Professor Binns blinked. "My subject is History of Magic," he said in his dry, wheezy voice. "I deal with facts, Miss Granger, not myths and legends." He cleared his throat, and a small noise like chalk, snapping, continued. "In September of that year, a subcommittee of Sardinian sorcerers—" He stuttered to a halt. Hermione's hand was waving in the air again. "Miss Grant?" "Please, sir, don't legends always have a basis in fact?" Professor Binns was looking at her in such amazement. Harry was sure no student had ever interrupted him before, alive or dead. "Well," said Professor Binns slowly, "yes, one could argue that, I suppose." He peered from Hermione as though he had never seen a student properly before. "However, the legend of which you speak is a very sensational, even ludicrous tale." But the whole class was now hanging on Professor Binns's every word. He looked dimly at them all, every face turned to his. Harry could tell he was completely thrown by such an unusual show of interest. "Oh, very well," he said slowly. "Let me see. The Chamber of Secrets. You all know, of course, that Hogwarts was founded over 1,000 years ago. The precise date is uncertain, by the 4 greatest witches and wizards of the age. The 4 schoolhouses are named after them: Godric Gryffindor, Helga Hufflepuff, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Salazar Slytherin. They built this castle together, far from prying Muggle eyes, for it was an age when magic was feared by common people, and witches and wizards suffered much persecution." He paused, gazed blearily around the room, and continued. "For a few years the founders worked in harmony together, seeking out youngsters who showed signs of magic and bringing them to the castle to be educated. But then disagreements sprang up between them. A rift began to grow between Slytherin and the others. Slytherin wished to be more selective about the students admitted to Hogwarts. He believed that magical learning should be kept within all magical families. He disliked taking students of Muggle parentage, believing them to be untrustworthy. After a while there was a serious argument on the subject between Slytherin and Gryffindor, and Slytherin left the school." Professor Binns paused again, pursing his lip, looked like a wrinkled old tortoise. "Reliable historical sources tell us this much, but these honest facts have been obscured by the fanciful legend of the Chamber of Secrets. The story goes that Slytherin had built a hidden chamber in the castle, of which the other founders knew nothing. Slytherin, according to the legend, sealed the Chamber of Secrets so that none would be able to open it until their own true heir arrived at the school. The heir alone would be able to unseal the Chamber of Secrets, unleash the horror within, and use it to purge the school of all who are unworthy to study magic." There was silence as he finished telling the story. but it wasn't the usual sleepy silence that Professor Binns' classes had. There was unease in the air as everyone continued to watch him, hoping for more. Professor Binns looked faintly annoyed. "The whole thing is arrant nonsense, of course," he said. "Naturally, the school has been searched for evidence of such a chamber many times, but by the most learned witches and wizards. It does not exist. A tale told to frighten the gullible." Hermione's hand was back in the air. "Sir, what exactly do you mean by horror within the chamber?" "That is believed to be some sort of monster which the heir of Slytherin alone can control," said Professor Binns in his dry, reedy voice. The class changed nervous looks. "I tell you the thing does not exist," said Professor Binns, shuffling his notes. "There is no chamber and no monster." "But, sir," said Seamus Finnegan, "if the chamber can only be opened by Slytherin's true heir, no one else would be afraid to find it, would they?" "Nonsense, O'Flaherty," said Professor Binns in an aggravated tone. "If a long succession of Hogwarts headmasters and headmistresses hadn't found the things,